Hello and welcome to another recorded training session for RPMS EHR. My name is Katie Johnson and I am the EHR Integrated Care Coordinator at the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board.
Today we are going to cover the Medications tab in EHR.
Time for my disclaimer. In all of these recordings, the database that I am using is a scrambled training database. It contains no real patient information. The data may look real, but it is not.
The Medications tab can be one of the more challenging areas of EHR to manage because there is so much going on the Medications tab, and it is such an important and central part of managing the patient and making sure that their medications are up to date and accurate and documented and clear for everyone who's using the record. And then also, as we're moving forward with health information exchange, clear to the patient where they can log in and see their personal health record online, or when we transfer it to an outside facility and a medication list goes with it, we want it to be as clean as possible. So just an overview, firstly, on the Medications tab in EHR. First, I wanted to point out that there are different columns here. Now, these columns act very much like an Excel spreadsheet in the sorting feature. So I just wanted to point out that you can click on a column and it will sort. You can barely see, I'm not sure if you can see that little triangle, shadow triangle right there that is shows that the outpatient medications now have been sorted alphabetically, and it has the little triangle pointing up. If you click it again, we notice the triangle is pointing down and it did reverse alphabetical order. But that's just what I wanted folks to know, that any of these columns can be sorted. It can be helpful sometimes in finding, if you're looking for medications or trying to get things in a different order than what they're defaulted to show up. Also, as a side note though, if you're finding that you are constantly needing to sort your medications every time you look at them, there is a default sort order that your clinical application coordinator can set. And if it seems, there's a recommendation out there that I believe it goes by issue date first and then status, and there are several different things down the line that it can be sorted on. But if you're finding that it doesn't seem like the ones that you need to look at are at the top most often, you can ask your CAC to look at what the default sort parameter is set for, and that might improve your overall feel of the Medications tab if you rearrange that, just as a side note there. Let's take a look at each column briefly. The first one is action. That has to do with, as you're taking actions on the Medications tab, things will show up here, particularly before you have signed it. So once you've signed it, that generally then is blank, as we're seeing here on this patient. The chronic check mark or chronic flag is a nice feature if it is used appropriately. Anybody can mark a medication as chronic or not. From the technical side, you don't need a special key or anything. But so in your own clinic, you'll want to work out who you want to be marking or unmarking medications as chronic as part of your medication reconciliation process. And related to that then is this chronic only button here that can reduce a lot of clutter if you're really using that chronic flag well, and only putting it, making sure that you've really got your medications marked as chronic appropriately. Then either sorting by chronic or using the chronic only button right here can simplify your medications view. The nice thing about the chronic flag is that when you're looking at it in this way, in this view, or using this button, is that it does honor the chronic flag regardless of status. So which can be nice because occasionally something might have expired or been discontinued inadvertently, or because it was renewed to another medication and then that expired, or just various scenarios that could happen. But if you have the medication marked as chronic, you'll still see it pulled up here and won't miss it based on the status. And I'm just clicking and unclicking that button to make those, the ones that are not marked as chronic, come and go. And while we're here, I'll show you quickly how easy it is to mark a medication as chronic or not. You simply highlight the medication by right-clicking, then you get this drop-down box, go to chronic medication, and say yes or no. And it's as easy as that. The next column is the name, the outpatient medications, the name of the medication. That's fairly straightforward. Status. You'll want to make sure you understand locally if any of these things are different, and some of these things can be different based on your situation, as far as, do you have an on-site RPMS pharmacy that you use within your clinic? Do you e-prescribe to outside pharmacies using the RPMS e-prescribing? Or do you do a combination of both? And some of that might have to do with what status and process icons that we see here. Pending means that it has been sent to your on-site RPMS pharmacy and they just have not processed it yet. Active means the medication has been made active and either sent to an outside pharmacy by being e-prescribed, or filled at your in-house pharmacy, or printed to be hand-delivered to a patient, or that a patient might take that prescription and hand-deliver it, or perhaps you fax it over somewhere or something like that. Discontinued means discontinued. The caveat on that is that when you renew or change a medication and sometimes otherwise manipulate a medication, order a new one, you may get asked the question, do you want to discontinue the old one? There are certain functions. Using the change function does not automatically discontinue your old medication, but using the renew function does. So you might see you renewed a medication somewhere down the road and you notice that you've got something that's discontinued. Well, that could just be that it's the older order and there's a more recent order for the same medication. So just be careful not to have kind of a knee-jerk reaction to the status of discontinued, meaning that it absolutely was discontinued. It could have been that it was just, there's a more recent order out there. The other status categories you might see based on your location are hold. And again, that's a service hold. And you can talk to your on-site pharmacy and other local folks to understand your process there. But that might be a situation where it was too soon to refill or too soon to fill, something like that, and the pharmacy placed it on hold. It's, so it's waiting for when the patient does need it. But don't confuse that with hold, as in like we think of it maybe more older inpatient sense of the word, that they're on this medication but we're holding it for a few days because we don't want them to take it. That's not the case here. In this context, it's a service hold, so a pharmacy hold. Suspense is the other status you might see here. And suspense, you'll probably only see if your clinic is using CMOP, and CMOP is the mail order pharmacy agreement that we have with the VA. So there might be other smaller situations where you see that as well, but that's the major time you might see a status of suspense. And again, that means it's suspended, awaiting the processing for things to happen with the mail order pharmacy. The process column here, the different icons. This icon with a little red cross here is meant to be a hospital or a clinic. So that means that it's filled at your on-site RPMS pharmacy. A printer means that it was printed to be filled at an outside pharmacy. So the pickup location while you're ordering was chosen to be outside pharmacy print, and then you get this icon. It has a green check mark on it if it was then printed. So we see we have somewhere they didn't get printed for whatever reason, but that's an easy way for you to check back and say, oh, the patient or the nurse or somebody says, oh, hey, I didn't get my prescription to take with me. And you can glance and say, oh, yep, I forgot to print it. It doesn't have a green check mark on it yet. Here, this example does have a green check mark. Another icon you might see if you're doing e-prescribing is the lightning bolt. The lightning bolt means that it was e-prescribed from our system electronically out to one of thousands of different pharmacies that are hooked into that network. The issue date column is that it was the date that the medication was issued. Now the last filled column is currently only accurate for things that are filled at an in-house RPMS pharmacy. If it was printed to be filled outside, or if it was e-prescribed, the system will just put in the issue date, because once it leaves our system, we currently don't have a feedback loop to know, and I'm speaking of the e-prescribing ones in particular here, but we don't get a feedback loop yet on if and when the patient actually filled the medication at the other pharmacy. And the printed one, that kind of takes it out of the electronic world of being able to get that information back. Expires, that's a calculation done based on the issue date. Refills remaining, very self-explanatory. The RX number, it has an X in front of it if it was to be filled at an outside pharmacy. And if it was to be filled in-house, which I have, the pending ones are still pending, they have not been filled, they don't have a prescription number yet, or these other columns populated. But here's one, so it's got a regular prescription number without an X in front of it. And you can make that bigger if you need it. I don't think many folks probably use prescription numbers. They might be useful for if you have some sort of audio care or call-in refill system. But otherwise, that column probably does not get used that much. Provider is the ordering provider. So one thing, speaking of columns, that you can do to reduce kind of the clutter on this page is, if you never use the prescription number and that's not helpful for you to see, if you right click on any of these columns, you can see that there are different options there with check marks. If I click on one, it unclicked the RX number and it disappeared from my view. If you are an e-prescribing only site, it might also be beneficial for you to take off the last fill date, because you know that that is always going to be the same as the issued date currently. So that can reduce the clutter of your view a little bit. And then if you like what you've done there, you can save the settings If not, you can do it day to day each time you log in. These buttons up here, we mentioned the chronic button, the active only button, again the same way. It considers pending as active because it knows that you just ordered it and it's waiting to be filled, but that can be sometimes confusing unless you understand that those two status are both considered active. Unclicking the active only will bring back everything. The calendar here, I've found it should look at the medications, so it says show only medications that are active at any time within the last X number of days. And you can go way back or you can narrow it down. I found that it's not as helpful on narrowing down a time range. So if you're really looking for something, I find the sorting is typically better, but if you need to look back a ways, that's where this can be helpful. So if you want to go way back and go back 500 days or something like that, you can do that, and it'll bring in all the medications that were active for that patient in that time period. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to mention about the overall layout of the tab here, these two buttons here have to do with when you're ordering medications, and we'll cover that in a minute. This is an on-demand order checker. So if I click on it, it gives me those same order checks that you would see as you're ordering it. So we're looking at duplicates, drug interactions, things like that you're used to seeing, or that you will be used to seeing if you're brand new in EHR. But if you wanted to see them all at once, you can click up here at any point. These two buttons here are the education and info buttons, and if you select a medication and then click on it, it will give you an education resource online, or the education resource being aimed more at the patient, and the I button possibly being aimed more at the clinician but could be used in either scenario. And the education one will also launch actually documenting the education dialogue. And if you see here, I had albuterol selected when I clicked on the ed button, and it searched for me on Medline these two that found actually albuterol, and I didn't have to search here, so it can be pretty slick. And then say I printed that out, handed it to the patient, and then it brought up this documented education dialogue, medications literature. I can fill in any of the things that I want and add it to document some education. And again, we were getting our -L education code, so that's another way to try to make it as few clicks as possible to get the education in for you. The outpatient medications here, that launches your overall quick order menu as well. And we'll get to that in a minute. So the overall layout again, you probably are seeing at least two sections, and if you have an inpatient ward at your location, you have a third section here for inpatient medications. And the system does know, based on where the patient is as far as their location here in the yellow box, if it is an inpatient ward, it'll make the inpatient section more prominent. But often, if you don't have an inpatient section, this can be defaulted to be down here at the very bottom, so that you may not ever even notice it because you won't be using it. But another one that you will be using is this. In this system, it's called the Non-Indian Health Service meds. This label here, you have local control over, so you can get with your clinic and decide what you want that to be called. If you don't like I think the default is actually non-VA meds, because this came again from a holdover from the VA. But sometimes it's labeled OTCs, herbals, and other meds, or just whatever makes sense to your clinic is what this can be labeled. And the difference between these two sections is your outpatient medications, things that belong in this section, are basically anything that your providers touched or were directly responsible for the patient getting. They prescribed it. Doesn't matter where it was filled. That in-house provider right there in your clinic prescribed it. And in that case, it belongs in the outpatient medications. Now, the way they prescribed it could have been they printed it to hand to the patient. They sent it to the on-site RPMS pharmacy, or they e-prescribed it electronically. Any of those things. But it was your provider that did it, so it belongs in the outpatient medications. The outside medications, which is also sometimes what this section is called, so your outside medications here. These are things that the only way you knew about them was that somebody told you about it. So, so maybe it's something that the patient buys on their own, or it's maybe from a specialist where the patient gets it from outside of your clinic and fills it from outside of your clinic. So I guess there's one caveat back up here on the outpatient medications, is if your on-site pharmacy does accept prescriptions from outside providers, then those medications will be up here. But that kind of falls into the category of, I should say, instead of your provider, maybe your clinic is directly involved in the patient getting that medication. So either your on-site RPMS pharmacy filled it, or one of your providers prescribed it. So, but again, down here, these are things that are filled outside of they're out of your control, basically. So, if specialists who prescribed and the patient filled at a different pharmacy, and they just told you about it, an over-the-counter or an herbal that the patient takes or makes on their own. Those are the things that belong down here. And this one is a much more, I guess you might say, forgiving way of ordering it. And I'll just show you, we'll see this again, but it's not a full free text situation, but so it is looking at things that have been entered in your drug file, which can be a challenge for certain herbal things or something like that. But you can work with your pharmacy or your CAC on getting entries in there for common, like if there's a locally common herbal thing that is a traditional medicine or something, you could get that entered in your drug file for this purpose. And the reason this is more forgiving, I say, is because basically nothing here is required, and you can free text things in because it's not generating a legal prescription. It's just for medication reconciliation purposes, getting the medication in here and getting it documented. You can fill in as much or as little information as you know, and you can actually ask your CAC also to add to this list of explanations if there's something that's coming up often that you feel isn't covered by one of these four. They can add another checkbox here. The advantage of documenting medications here is that they still, even though they're outside of your clinic, if you document it here, it'll still participate in order checks and allergy checks. And it's right there. It's just documented and gives you a better picture, a more complete picture of your patient's full medication list. Okay, one more thing about the features, and then we will talk about ordering medications. And that is, if you need to know a little bit more about one of these drugs and what happened to it, or why, maybe where it got printed for this instance, or when anything that might have happened to it. If you double click on it, you will get this medication details. And this can be helpful sometimes. Sometimes if you see, if you're really troubleshooting something or trying to figure something out, the details is usually the first place you might go. It might note that one provider ordered it and a different provider signed off for some reason, or you can see, what pharmacist maybe that processed it that maybe you need to talk to and ask them a question, or there's any number of things that you might get from here. One of the common things, particularly for printing and for e-prescribing, is this activity log that is within here that you can see where things were processed, which exact printer it was printed on. If it was reprinted, it also captures that here. Things like, so basically anything that's happened to this prescription, you get a lot of the detail here. Anything that is e-prescribed or printed is going to have this auto-finished bit, and that just means that it means the pharmacist didn't have to touch it from an inside pharmacy. The system went ahead and wrapped it up and took it from that pending status that we saw if you have an on-site pharmacy to an active status that can be printed or e-prescribed or whatever. So now let's talk a little bit about ordering medications. I want to strongly encourage the use of quick orders. So when I say quick orders, what I mean are these using your menu and finding, these are called quick orders. Anything that you find on your menu, on your ordering menus here. And the reason for that is, that a well-built quick order lives up to its name in that you pretty much should just need to review it, have your day's supply selected, your quantity, some refills defaulted, but any of these things you can change as you're going. The route, the schedule, and you want to pay attention to your pickup location if you sometimes have different, if you might send it outside, or if you're e-prescribing, you will have an additional button here that will have the ability to e-prescribe. But so a well-built quick order, all you're having to do is choose a clinical indication, and then you can accept. Now, the difference, I just want to contrast that with using what some people call all other meds. You've got this, you're just looking at the whole drug file here. And so first you have to find your med, and you can type a few things here, a few letters, and it'll narrow your search down. The dosage is not selected for you. The day supply, quantity, refills are not selected, and any other special things that might be needed to make an accurate prescription are not going to be there if you use the all other meds section. And for a lot of meds, maybe that's okay because maybe they are straightforward, but there are plenty of other ones that particularly if you're e-prescribing, because of how things are transmitted, and also with your in-house pharmacy, that maybe somebody has spent a lot of time really working on getting the order just right, because maybe the quantity is not a common quantity, or there's a particularly one use would be a taper medication. If you have a standard taper of something that you use, and maybe somebody's built a nice order for you, or even an order set in some instances where two things get ordered together, or any number of other examples. Maybe some things are added in on on a note to Pharmacist that are defaulted in, or patient instructions here, or even there maybe the person building the quick orders has dropped in some nifty things like some weight information, or some sort of patient data object that can help you out, that you need to see while you're ordering, things like that. And if you find that we suggest that you take a little time to get to know the layout of your quick order menus. But these are so customizable. So if you are finding that something seems out of place, or it doesn't seem like it makes more sense for your practice if you had these meds grouped together on one menu, or this, talk with your CAC or your pharmacy person who is in charge of these things. It depends on what site, how your site works, about who was in charge of building these. But there are some really nifty things that you can do with these menus. You can set up weight-based menus so that you don't have to do a calculation on children's weight-based meds. There's not an example of that on here, but it would be more like you click on the weight-based medications, and then you would click on the weight. You might have options of 10 kilos, 12 kilos, whatever, and you click on that, and then it has your list of medications, all the quick orders already made for that weight. So, and also grouping things together, like, well, I know I need to order both of these things for HIV post-exposure on this system. Another way is maybe that you could even have, if there's certain protocols or first-line antibiotics, or antibiotic stewardship is a big push right now as well. So maybe you organize the antibiotics menu as first line, second line, third line for different diseases that you have on here. There's so many different things that you can do with these quick order menus, and so I want to encourage you to get to know them, and then also ask questions and see if there are things that can help you out in using them. Oh, one other thing to mention, that what is nifty about a quick order menu and might help particularly specialists, or maybe if you're working in a, maybe you have a well child clinic type menu, or I guess well child maybe isn't a great example, because hopefully they are well and not needing medications, but a walk-in clinic, and you have all your cold meds all on one menu or something like that. You can mix and match these things, but there's a little keyboard trick here that can be helpful sometimes, and that is if you hold down the control button before you start clicking on anything with your mouse. So right now I have the control button held down, and then I clicked on the Actifed and the Nasolide and the lisinopril here, and then I released the control button, and you see this little thing popped up down here, selected orders. It built a little on-the-fly order set, so it's going to walk me through those 3 that I just selected without me having to go back and forth between. So I say I did that one, and I can accept or quit on each one of these, and it's just going to bring up the next one. So that can be helpful, particularly if you have some common things that you order together on a menu. You can pick and choose and let go and do it all at once. Another feature of the medication order dialog, and when I say medication order dialog, what I mean is this box here. And that is if there's anything that you want to do where it's a different dose in the morning than in the afternoon, or one dose for 5 days, then a different dose for the next 5 days, or anything that's not just kind of your standard one dose once a day kind of thing. You can always use this complex tab. So it's right next to the dosage tab, and you click on the complex, and then you can build your order as needed. And there are quite a few different things, possibilities that you have here. And you just keep going. You just keep building your order and whatever you need to do. And I'm just filling in boxes here just so you see. And as you're building it, it's writing it down here in this review pane here. So that's how you do a complex order. And then if you have one built and you realize, oh, I skipped a dose, I really need to do that, I don't want to redo the whole thing, they have this nifty function right here, insert row. It inserted one, or remove row. I can remove one. So that's how you accomplish more complex dosing. Now if it's something like a standard taper that you're finding yourself using day after day, then you can ask, you can make quick orders out of these complex orders as well. So you can just ask your CAC to say, hey, I'm really, I use this prednisone taper whenever I do prednisone, could you make a quick order out of it? Or a standard metformin starting dose, tapering somebody up on the dose, or things like that. You can just make quick orders out of, so that you don't even have to build the complex each time. Okay, so that is for when you need to order a new medication. But often established patients, or even patients that you know well, or not even, but they have a good solid med list already in here, you're probably more likely going to be renewing or discontinuing, or basically managing the current med list that's already here, and you might not need to order new things that often. So if you have several chronic medications that you need to reorder, there are a couple different ways to do that. You can do them individually, and you can highlight them and right click and choose any of these options. I will caution on refill, that's really not, that's kind of a misnomer. What that is that's only, currently what it does is fire off only a refill request to your in-house pharmacy. It's not actually ordering a medication, so different sites use this in different ways. Some don't use it at all, and just teach their providers that really they have different processes for if it's a perfectly good med order, it's got 11 refills, the patient just is here today and is seeing me as a provider, and maybe they have some other communication method to let the pharmacy know, yes, go ahead and refill this, I don't need to reorder it, but the patient does need it today. So that'll be something kind of locally to talk about, but just don't, it's not an actual order. So some sites just don't use that at all, and use more, when you think of needing to do that, you're really thinking renew. So again, talk with your local folks to see what your process is at your clinic. But change can be very useful. You can, if all you're doing is changing a dose or something like that, you can do that. Copy to new order. It does what it says there. Discontinue or cancel a med. Process, I'll show you that. It's available here. It's also available up here. Renew, transfer to inpatient. So that's one place you can access it, is one at a time. Or you can also use the keyboard trick again. If I hold down Control and then start clicking on medications, it has them all highlighted for me and then I can do either the same function to all of them, or my preference, and I'll show you this in a minute, is using the process here or the process there. This is the same thing. Process button here, process option here. So control, holding down the control, lets you pick and choose which things you want to highlight. If you've got all your meds grouped together, you can save yourself a click, and if I hold down shift and click a medication further down on the list, it's going to highlight everything in between my first and my last things that I have highlighted. So again, the difference is the control is kind of the pick and choose. If I hold down shift, I can get a big group all at once. Okay, so now to show you the process option here and how this can be beneficial to you. You can highlight as many or as few medications as you want, and then click on the process button. And it's going to queue up everything that you have highlighted. And it's going to give you all the different actions right here. So say, I know, you know what, I want to highlight everything. I know I'm not going to renew everything. I know some of them are going to change or discontinue. So I don't want to just right click on my group and choose change, because that's not the case for all of them. The advantage of using the process button is that it lets you do a different function on each one of the things that you have highlighted. So here, the first thing that pulled up was the Provençal, and even if you realize, oh, I highlighted something that I didn't actually need to do anything with today, they have that skip button there, and I just clicked that, and now it just brought up warfarin. Again, I can say I want to renew this. It only highlights the things that I can change, and on a renewal, the only things I can change are the number of refills. And then I click on renew. And then it's going to bring up the next medication that was in there that happened to also be a warfarin as I went down my list. And let's say I'm going to discontinue that one. And then I select the DC button here. And it's asking me why. Let's choose a reason. Click OK. And it's going to bring up my next medication. And let's say I'm going to skip this one. Okay, let's say on this one I want to actually do a change instead. And notice the difference between renew and change. When I click on change, now I have available all of the different fields here to be able to change as I need to. Whereas renew, the only thing it let me have access to was the refills. And that's a safety feature. So if you know I want to renew the exact same medication as is, then renew makes that happen because it does not let you change anything. And then there's always a quit button that I can choose at any point. There's another feature of all the order dialogues are ADRs here, and that's just a way that you can look at the patient's adverse drug reactions without having to leave your order dialogue. If you're like, oh wait, this patient was allergic to something, but let me see what the deal was on it, and you can get to more details there from within your order dialogue. And if I want to take no action, I can skip. And if I get pulled away in the middle of this and I just want to get out of it, I can just hit quit, and it stopped where I was in my list of medications I was working on. So then we can see also, I mentioned that the action column will show up as you're ordering meds, and here we have, this is the one I renewed, this is the one I discontinued, and on down the line like that. One other function I might mention, forgot to mention of any order dialogue, is the use of the patient instructions versus the notes to pharmacist section. So your patient instructions are going to go on the label most likely. And so that, again, that's something that you want the patient to know. And it's a short little section here. Notes to pharmacist, basically the only thing that belongs in here is anything that you couldn't get communicated up here, either in your complex dose or a regular dose, anything here. What you want to avoid in the notes to pharmacist section is any dosage information, or to say, I really want the 250, but I couldn't find it. You know, that you're still sending over, in this case, an amoxicillin 500 milligram order, and this can be missed. So don't change your prescription down here in the notes to pharmacist section. Things that go here are things like notes to your pharmacist, things like, patient needs second inhaler for school, or I'm increasing the dose based on their lab value, or just anything like that that you think might help out, or kind of see what's going on with this order is what would belong in the notes to pharmacist section. And then here I'm going to go ahead and sign these two that I had, just so you can see how they switch over here. And here we go. So now the action column is empty and my orders are queued up. So now we have a note on the print button and the checkered flag, the Q print section here. The system will queue things up for printing based on both the drug class and also what you chose as a pickup location. So let's order, we've got one thing queued up to print now, and that was the one that we chose as an outside pharmacy print as our pickup location. Let's order something else here, let's order a C2 that we know needs a wet signature for an in-house pharmacy fill. So I'm going to order that. I'm going to leave the pickup location as window, and I know that this is not clinically accurate. I'm just doing it for demonstration purposes here. So I'm going to accept the order. And then I'm going to sign it. It's giving me an order check. Did I type whatever I need to in there? And notice now we have, so it's pending to be filled in-house based on the status and the process icon. But it knew also, hey, you're gonna need to print this based on the drug class that it's in. So it queued up the printing for two things. One, my methadone for an in-house prescription, and one was my warfarin that was chosen as a pickup location of outside pharmacy print, so it knows it's going to print it on the template that is meant to be hand carried outside. And this one, and you can, this is more important to the pharmacy types, but you can set up different templates if needed, print templates here to accommodate if there are certain more requirements that might go on a C2 on an in-house versus an outside, or the type of paper it needs to be printed on can be defaulted on the printer, and just all different items like that. So right here, and then I would click OK, and it would print what I needed. And again, this would be working with your pharmacy and your CAC on, you can make these defaults so that hopefully you're not having to choose a printer or a template each time. Okay, I believe that covers it. Just a basic overview of the medications tab and the management. Thank you for listening.